through a special order, it's a special rule in the House of Representatives that the suspension calendar, as it's called, is basically like a consent calendar. It's exclusively controlled by the Speaker. It puts things on there and you can get them passed very quickly with just basically a assent of the House. And so these are generally reserved for non-controversial measures, right? And there was a measure that came up that was opposing the Mexican drug cartels and says, you know, they're terrible and they're bad and all these things are true about them. And at the end, it said, and we reaffirm our fight against illegal marijuana, and we reaffirm our drug war commitments, something like that. And I took a look at that and said, ooh, I don't think that's good. And it popped into my mind. I was in a meeting, stepped out of a meeting, and I thought, who is the one person in Congress who I can call, who I know will take up this issue, who I know will be down there speaking about this and pointing out the fallacies in the argumentation and speaking for our community. And there was one guy, and that guy was Congressman Jared Polis. And he went down. Congressman Polis went down to the floor of the House of Representatives, and from the well of the House, as far as I'm aware, for the first time in history, called for from that podium the legalization of marijuana, to the end of our failed policy of marijuana. And so today, it brings me incredible excitement that he's here with you, and you're going to get to hear from him. So with that, no further ado, Congressman Jared Polis.
You know, when I first met Aaron, he was kind of in the shoes that many of you are in today. He was active in student government at the University of Colorado. That's how we met. I was running for State Board of Education at the time, and he was active in the Student Government Association, I think, and state chapter. And as I said, he was, you know, that's where many of you are today. I met, I think, the president of the Colorado Springs campus at the University of Colorado. Colorado Springs is here, and a number of others from student leaders from all across the country. And you're learning a lot about how politics and government work. I mean, I got the chance coming down here to look at your schedule and actually really learn more, you know, in this day or two, I think, about how government really works than you learn in like your semester class about government. So I don't know if there's some disconnect here, but you really are learning how it really works. This is everything how it works. All the talks, you know, about you know, how policy is made, the politics of it, the nitty-gritty you're getting into. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is how to get any issue. So, I mean, you're learning about it here with an issue that we all care about, and we'll talk more about it in a moment. But this is the same type of process for whatever you want to change. So, you know, you're getting some good tools that you can use to change things, change the world. This is an interesting policy issue. You know, in terms of legalizing marijuana, it's really fascinating because you'll have very close to, you know, you probably have a good 40% of the people of the country that agree with it, which is a lot. You know, it's pretty close to a majority. And yet in Congress, you hardly find any that are willing to do it. I mean, you don't have 40% in Congress. That would be very different if we had, you know, like 180 Congress people that were like, you know, going off on things like this. It would be totally different. And we had maybe like 4 or something, you know, or 5. Now, there's a lot more members that maybe personally are there, but they need the courage and they need kind of a political reason to be public about it. They don't necessarily have any personal objection to changing the laws, but they're just kind of trying to follow the winds. But I think it's pretty clear where the wind is going. You know, we have had legalization of medical marijuana in a growing number of states. I have a hard time keeping up with the total. I think, I don't know, 17 or something, 16, I don't know, it's getting up there. And I'm excited that my home state might be, has a chance of being the first at full legalization next year. We're very excited about that. regardless of where you live, if you have time next summer, come out to Colorado. I'm sure they could use some volunteers on that campaign. Maybe that's what they're training all of you to do. I don't know, but it'll be tough. It'll be close. The efforts of volunteers and donors will make the difference in that. And really, what moves the ball federally, it is when states are moving forward. So we are close to having a critical mass of states that have medical marijuana. It'll really test the federal law and require federal action when any states do outright legalization. But even with regard to the medical marijuana, there's a whole lot of issues that have arisen, like access to banking for the industry. The federal government's still doing raids. And I think we're almost at the point where if we get a few more states to have medical marijuana, we'll have the critical mass at the national level to make sure that the federal laws are not contradictory and in the way of what states are doing. Legalization, one state can really force that issue. I don't know what the federal response will be. On one hand, we worry about what that federal response will be, but also if there's no really aggressive response, there will be an enormous backlash, I think, that would actually lead to more support for what some of the states are doing. So it's an interesting time, that we live in. It's a time of great change. I think those that have fought this battle for a long time are finally beginning to see the signs of progress and the signs of victory. The fact that legalization came so very close in our most populous state, the state of California, it really shows how this debate has moved from where it was 10 or 20 years ago. You're probably getting a lot of good messaging ideas from other people, but there's a few obvious ones that I think are important to share. We never want to conflate, being in favor of legalization with somehow being in favor of marijuana. I'm not in favor of marijuana. I'm not, in favor of alcohol. I don't really drink, and I've never smoked marijuana. It's about people being able to do things and execute responsibility over their lives. It's about objective data. Marijuana is not as chemically addictive as substances that are legal, like tobacco and nicotine and alcohol. It's not as damaging in many ways as some of the others. So it's a bad thing. I don't like it. I hope none of you use it. But I think that it's an important battle to fight for the country. It's the direction that we're headed as a nation, and you're in the vanguard of doing that. And there's a number of ways to get involved. One of them that I want to tout today is we're actually just started a drug policy reform website. So we focus not just on legalizing marijuana, of course, but also on the demilitarization of the drug war. Really, this is a health issue. Drugs are a health issue. How many of you have had, if you're embarrassed, you don't have to raise your hand, but in your family or friends, how many of you have had to deal with that issue of drug abuse among family or friends? I have, and many of you have. You know that is a tough thing to deal with, that people go through, whether it's alcohol or drugs. And you know that somehow having that person thrown in jail is obviously not the right thing for your family or your friend or you. It doesn't make any sense when somebody's fighting that. They need treatment, they need support, they need to make sure that those around them are not enabling them. There's a whole lot of science around how to deal with it in multiple ways that different people deal with it, but being locked in a cell is probably not one of the best ways of dealing with it. It is a difficult thing. But we are active on that front, and we launched a website, and it's fearlesscampaign.com/drug policy. So fearlesscampaign.com, one word, fearlesscampaign.com/drug policy. You can sign up there. That follows the national and the congressional piece. So things happen very quickly. Like this bill that Aaron mentioned, I think we probably had a couple hours notice about going to the floor and doing it. So what this will do is when something's happening in the House or Senate, we will get word out, call your representatives, sign this petition, whatever it is that's relevant in that moment in time, you'll get kind of the very best and most timely information before some of the groups that we rely on would have time to organize, because it just sometimes things happen too quickly. So, and you'll also know which members are helpful and which aren't, who we need to pressure to move something, and kind of what's going on. So that's what we're doing there. You can also follow my personal Twitter account. I tweet about drug policy reform sometimes. I'm at Jared Polis. Pretty simple. So anyway, this is an exciting time to be an activist in this area. I mean, you're here at an historic moment. I do want to emphasize that victory is not foregone. This could go the other way. And you could be here at a moment where you thought you saw victory, and the prohibition got worse, in 5 years. Medical marijuana was eliminated, and everything went back underground. Or we'll be at a point where 5 or 10 years from now, it will be regulated and legal. And which route we go on really depends on your actions of this historic time. So I'm really glad that you're here and being trained to take action, because absent the actions that you will take in your states and the federal level, there could be setbacks in this area. Despite the encouraging trends that we've seen of the last 5 years. I think there's a lot of powerful arguments to make. Again, you don't want to come across ever as pro-marijuana, pro-law enforcement. We're for law and order. We're for, gutting the fuel that funds the criminal cartels and the violence. About half of the funding for the Mexican drug cartels is for marijuana. So just on that one step, marijuana legalization, you cut off the violence, the funding by 50%. I mean, that's an enormous progress in terms of the lives and the safety of the people, and whether it's Texas, Arizona, Juarez. What a difference that makes. And as we talk about a broader demilitarization effort, we're also inspired by some of the global examples of countries that have moved in this direction, whether it's Portugal, whether it's Holland. There's some do's and don'ts, and I think we do need, obviously, a national drug policy. In fact, it may won't cost as much as our current national drug policy, which is a war on drugs, but it will cost money. There'll be some savings there, but maybe if we invest even a quarter of what we spend on the war on drugs on the health aspects of fighting drug abuse, of education, and of course the enforcement aspect that will continue, namely making sure that the regulatory structure is implemented properly and that minors don't have access to illegal substances. We can go a long way towards, I believe, reducing drug abuse in the country, saving lives, reducing crime, increasing the tax base, decreasing the danger to people who do make the bad choice to use drugs, because there will be better quality controls around what's being used. So there's a lot of reasons to do it. I was asked recently, I can't remember the name of the magazine, but some magazine asked me where I had to name the pros and cons of drug legalization, of marijuana legalization. I had a tough time coming up with the cons, but what I said, well, the cons are that it's probably only a matter of years till we have the big marijuana lobbyists hitting Washington, D.C. Just like today we have the big oil and big tobacco lobbyists. Because once there is an industry, it will come to be dominated by corporate America like everything else. So that will become its own threat in time, when they're trying to stifle studies that show that marijuana is harmful, and pretend like it's not at all addictive, just like they did with tobacco and nicotine. So hopefully you'll be there for that battle to fight against big marijuana in 10 years. Let's take it down. With that, I'd love to open it up and see what's on your minds. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes? Well, how do you approach a representative? Well, like myself, well, I'm already supportive, so I'm pretty, probably you want to approach people that are not, maybe on the fence. Members of Congress are responsive to their constituents. So you all, who knows the name of their representative in Congress? Okay, so most of you do. Give yourselves a round of applause. Guys, a few of you that don't. and it's easy enough to find out how to do that. You can type in your zip code on different sites and it tells you. So if you live, you can set up a meeting. If you get 3, 5, 10 people from your district, just set up a meeting with that member and say, we're a group of constituents. We want to meet with the member, the congressman or woman, about drug policy. And you just advance a red like that. You also have the political aspect. That means volunteering on campaigns for or against candidates that support or oppose. Getting to know them. If you want to get to know a member of Congress, you can get to know them during their campaign pretty easily because we all need volunteers. So, I mean, people march with me, in parades and we just sort of talk, and if they have something, they know me. They volunteer at our house parties to check people in. And every member and we run every 2 years, for crying out loud. So we're always in need of volunteers. And you can, if you have somebody that you think is movable, I mean, once you figure out that they are against you, you probably don't want to volunteer for them. Then you call their opponent and you volunteer for them. But most members are going to be somewhere in the middle on this, and they're open to education. And we have the Congress we have, so it's much something I don't know, 80-some% are reelected. So. Most of them aren't going to lose on this issue. They just won't. I mean, it's not that, we wish that they would lose on this issue, but they won't. So try to work with the Congress we have. Most of them are not biased against our position. They just lack courage and they lack backbone and they lack foresight. But we can move them along. So start by volunteering, and unless there's a very negative, and it might, by the way, mean somebody you don't really even like on other issues. So I mean, maybe you're a Democrat and it's a Republican incumbent in a district that's solid Republican, or you're a Republican and this is a Democrat, or you're a Libertarian and you hate both of them. But if you care about this issue, this is how single-issue groups can advance their agenda, is you have to make this your issue with that candidate. This is how, groups like the NRA on guns are so effective. Doesn't matter whether this is how different groups in any single issue are so effective. So if they're, with you and moving on your issue, you might not like that, today in the House of Representatives when they voted to take away all the funding from NPR. So you may like that, you may not, but you just have to not care what their position is because you are here as an activist for this cause. Doesn't mean you can't talk to them about other things. You can, but this is your cause. And that's the way that a group that focuses on a single issue can make change. There are going to be, I think, an increasing number of voters for whom this is an important cause. I don't know if it's going to be the only cause they care about. But certainly those who recreationally use marijuana, those who use it under medical auspices, this is an important, they may care more about the economy and having a job, so maybe that's their number one issue, but this will be up there. It could very well be an issue for them as well. So I got asked about it when I campaigned. I went door to door, many over a couple of years in both campaigns, my campaigns combined. So I've been asked about it dozens of times, sometimes with certain smells in the background, and I think everybody who asked me about it was very happy about my response. I mean, nobody ever asked me about it and was on the other side of it. Everybody who asked me about it was somebody that I was worried might forget to vote because of certain things that they do as a hobby. So I hope that they did go out and vote, but they were all very happy, probably in general, also, was my position on this issue. Yes, in the back, in the green.
I was just wondering, you mentioned sending out internet alerts to sign a petition. I'm guessing you mean an online petition, your name and your email address. I was just wondering how seriously those are taken in the House and the Senate, and what happens to them after you sign it and you click submit.
Great, good question. Yeah, and so phone calls are more effective. So it's a little bit. So this could be call your representative right away, but also petitions are important. Where that can be important is if we can demonstrate that there's 150 people in your district that care about this. It's not so important if 3 sign it in somebody's district, but if you can go to a representative, they know that 150 people in their district sign this, they're going to pay attention. Phone calls, 10 phone calls from their district would make a pretty big impact. So it's and then letters, 5 or 10 letters on a particular topic is a pretty significant amount, if they come in the course of a week. So, they all have have a part, they're all part of the activism. And then, by the way, all three makes it look like it's an even bigger groundswell, particularly if it's not the same people's names on all of them. I mean, a petition, and the names of the people that call and write can be on the petition, but you add that. So it's like 150 on a petition, 8 called, 11 wrote. Something's going, you know, the representatives can say, something's going on, I better think about this issue. Especially because no one's going to be calling on the other side most of the time on this. Because we're organized, you're organized. There is opposition, but not in this organized political sense yet. Not that there won't be, maybe there will, but right now there's not. I'll let whoever's holding the microphone deliver it to the next person. Yeah.
So I am fortunate enough to have not just a congressman, but also a senator who is, neither of them are as progressive as the districts they represent, drug policy and otherwise. Unfortunately, both of them are probably going to get reelected next year. What can I do to actually put the pressure on this issue? Because I think that both of them are quite possibly swayable, but I just don't know how to approach them.
Really, you know, have you and people who are your fellow activists get to know them. So, I mean, you're going to, you know, volunteer in their campaign and you'll be seeing them around and you'll talk to them about this issue. You'll try to bring in a group of people who agree and talk to them about this issue. You know, that's what you're going to do. So, I mean, you know, you can easily get to know them during the course of a campaign and try to make friends on their staff who will advise them. You know, those are the kinds of things that I think are important to do. And then you try to pin them down and move them a little bit. I mean, maybe if they're not for outright legalization, they'll sponsor the industrial hemp farming bill or the bill that allows banking, you know, to happen, or the tax and equity bill. So, I mean, there's kind of like these part of the way measures that maybe you can kind of get. And then once they see there's no blowback to them. I mean, they can sponsor the hemp industrialization bill and industrial hemp bill, and no one's going to complain. So once they get like a couple toes in, then maybe you can say, then you can come out for full legalization. We'll take 2 more after this.
Hi there, Congressman. My name is Sebastian, representing the University of Michigan SSDP chapter. Just a question as far as how to present an argument against prohibition to an elected official like yourself. I kind of feel that there are 3 tacks that one can take on just a general anti-prohibition platform, being historically looking at the genesis of drug policy, you know, looking at things like the 1937...
They won't care about that one.
Okay. Then there's presently looking at patterns of look at incarceration rates or economic costs, and it's just not sensible. And then there's kind of the really, what you would think you touched on, even as a non-user, someone who doesn't drink, it's just civil liberties standpoint, it's just not right. People should be permitted to exercise responsibility. Is that going to resonate as heavily with an official, or is it...
It's definitely not the first one. The others kind of depend on the member. So if you have to research the person, right? And if they're Mr. Law and Order, former sheriff, that's their big thing, you're going to go in there and say, this is how we reduce crime. I mean, look at this. There's all this crime, all this money flowing to the criminal gangs and the cartels, all this violence. We can reduce crime by, 20% if we do this. You get all this. I mean, this is the crime in your district alone that was related to drugs. So, I mean, that's a good selling point for them. Other people, like Miss ACLU, Miss Civil Liberties, you go to her and you say, the civil liberties thing. So, it's just different. And the health issue. Other people are going to care about the health side. I mean, look, the fact that it's illegal is killing people with tainted product. It's preventing any research about any effectiveness. So, I mean, I would say get to know what that member's interests are first. You don't want to go into the wrong member with the wrong pitch. I mean, it would backfire totally, completely. I mean, there's a member who, would hate the ACLU and civil liberties and just sponsored the Patriot Act, and you go in and you say, it's our right, it's a civil liberty. I mean, that makes the line go even further from you, right? And likewise, if you go into somebody who's, you got to know the member, so you got to know the pitch. But it's never, I don't think any member is going to be like the history of how it happened. It'll be health, law enforcement, economics, those are the big ones. Take, did you have one? And then we'll go back there for the last one. Yeah, go ahead. The microphone's right there, I think.
Federal drug policies may criminalize cannabis in any way, shape, or form, whether it's medicinal or industrial hemp. Is there sort of unity in Congress between the medicinal marijuana movement and industrial hemp movement, or is that more fragmented in nature?
Well, I mean, I think they're different, slightly different issues. Clearly, we have a industrial hemp bill that legalizes industrial hemp that I'm a co-sponsor of. It's a different issue. It's simply a different issue than the medical use, which requires some of the active ingredients that are not in industrial hemp. That's your question?
Yeah. Would it be more needed to just full legalization altogether then?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I support. So I don't think that the first bill that passes Congress will be full legalization, though. I think it'll be one of these other things, maybe allowing them access to banking or maybe industrial hemp. I mean, that would likely be the first one that actually passes. Yeah. Last one. Apologize, I have to go to the airport after this.
Well, mine's a little bit more. You mentioned that state-level politics are going to be really important in influencing the federal level. So I was wondering what you would say to any of the young folks in this room that may be considering running for office themselves. Yeah. Especially there's a lot of uncontested races at the state level. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions for the future politicians. Yeah,
this is actually very important. You need to run for state legislature soon. Very important. In some states it's 25 years old. Unfortunately, Colorado is one of those. In some states it's 21. In some states it's 18. I don't think it's, maybe some states are 23, but it's 18, 21, 25, pretty much in every state. And you should run. So you need to kind of learn the history. I mean, you don't just randomly run. You have to live in the right district. So first of all, do you have term limits? Is there an open seat in your district anytime soon? Is it a Democratic or Republican seat? Unfortunately, most seats are sort of gerrymandered one way or the other. So you may be a Republican, but if the seat's like 70% Democratic, I mean, you can run if you want to and talk about drug legalization, but you won't win. And likewise, if the seat's 70% Republican and you're a Democrat, you kind of have to be a Republican to win. So you can do one of two things. You can either change your party identification, or you can move to a place where your party will elect the person, and then you run. And a key thing when you run is you don't run away from being in favor of marijuana legalization, but you don't lead with that as your #1 issue either, because you're trying to convince voters to vote for you. That's your issue. That people who like you, they'll support you. Your volunteer base will come because of drug legalization. You'll raise money because of that. But like to voters, they really are going to care about the economy and jobs, improving schools, protecting the environment. All these things are always number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the polls, and you'll just lose no matter what if you just keep talking about drug legalization. Now, you may want to run and lose anyway because you get the word out. So I mean, you can be a single issue candidate and talk about drug legalization and get like 15%, and maybe the others notice. But I don't recommend that. It kind of marginalizes the issue more. I recommend you run and win. Also, it's more fun. You get to win. You do the job. Then you get to be honorable. For your whole life, it'll say like honorable so-and-so in front of your name, like your mail and stuff. So you should run, and you'll have a core group of support from the drug reform community. But you also have to think about stuff you never thought, like, oh wait, how do I think we should improve public schools? And like, oh yeah, healthcare. What do I think we should do on healthcare? And you can like, if you're in a Democratic Republican Party, you can kind of just take your party's talking points on the stuff you don't really care about and just, spit it back out. Or you can try to think about these things yourself and come up with what you need to say. But it's great to run, and it's fun. Even if you're a long shot, I mean, it's a great experience. You might as well run when you're, 23 or 25 or 21, whatever you're allowed to do. And, the state legislature is where a lot of the action is, but don't rule out other things like city council. This issue is not going away. It has many dimensions. Like in Colorado, we have medical marijuana statewide, but many cities are banning it. So the battleground has kind of moved to the cities. Now the state hasn't legalized it overall yet, we just have medical, but still, city after city, some are banning it, some are not. So there's a lot of interest in, I have friends of mine that say, I want to run for city council because my city banned dispensaries, and I oppose that. Now again, in running for city council, that may be a question people ask, but it's not their main issue. They're going to ask about potholes by their thing, they're going to talk about crime, they're going to talk about why the garbage collector didn't come this Thursday. It's the city issues that they care about. Marijuana is down on that list, so you just have to be aware of that, but running for city council is also great. So county commissioner is another one. That's usually if you get a little more senior to run for that. So these are all great things. You're all going to be state legislators soon, and you're going to be the vanguard of the change, which is exciting. And you're going to contribute in a lot of other subject areas as well. But it's time that this nation ended our failed drug war and moved forward with a drug policy that works for our economy and for our people. And you are going to be the army that makes that happen. So I'm honored to be before you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you so much. All right. Are you guys psyched?
Thank you. Great speech.
That was awesome. We've been talking about changing policy all day, and we actually heard from a guy who does it just now. Go figure that, you know? So, guys, we've got an exciting night ahead still, and I'd like to ask to capture everyone's attention just a little bit more, just for a few more minutes, and then we'll talk about the rest of the night.